if you're suffering, you're still not enlightened. This sounds a bit radical point to make, but if we go to the beginning of the story with classical spirituality from Christianism to Buddhism, yes, both paths accept that life is suffering, but they clearly point to not suffering. And enlightenment in Christianism would be the realization of Christ. Enlightenment is the opposite of suffering. So no, there is no depression after enlightenment. It cannot be. I mean, anything can happen, but it doesn't happen to anyone. So no, there is none in the way we understand it. So if you find yourself suffering, that is something that I hear all the time. It is important maybe to distinguish what kind of suffering you're having. Because if you're under a spiritual path, you may have been meditating for a long time or trying to be the best person you can for a long time, and you still find yourself surprised to suffer on close to childish things, let's say like getting angry at someone or something like that, that is okay. That is just pointing you. That is clearly showing you what is still missing. And that's okay. It's a good thing to happen. And if you really take that attitude, that's not suffering. You're already appreciating it. You're already taking it as a pointer, as a teacher. So definitely at some point down the path, you appreciate every bad thing it could happen to you, including suffering, because it really points you really want to know the truth, and any kind of suffering is pointing you towards it. So it can be useful. That being said, no, there's no pride in suffering. I say this because you probably have seen in religious context from Christianism how they would inflict themselves pain. Or in Buddhism, some people saying that you can be depressed and enlightened at the same time. I think this all comes from someone who's been a long time meditating or on the path and they haven't really get the fruition. So they feel really bad about themselves, and at some point they have to claim, I must be enlightened. They may have had experiences, but enlightenment is definitely a permanent state, and it is already the case. And it's okay to suffer. It's just a reminder that it can still be better. It is not something to be ashamed of that you're suffering. It's something to celebrate. This is a celebration. It's to know, yes. There's a promise of heaven. There's a promise of something else. It can get better. So take your suffering as a pointer to that. Good news, you're still not there. There's a lot more good stuff to come. A lot more happiness to come to you. A lot more love. You can understand the suffering that comes to your life in that way, then by the definition of psychology or anyone, you're not really suffering. If you appreciate any little bit of it, then you're fine. You're definitely not in the regular sense of the word suffering, like depressed or something like that. That being said, there's a different kind of suffering. It's more existential suffering that is not caused because you lost your job or your girlfriend left you or something like that, or you have no money or you're sick. It's not caused by that. It's not caused by a circumstance. It's caused by apprehending mentally and actively cooperating with something, which is that you are a being that was created, a consciousness that was created in a body. So you are a body surviving in a world, and things are random, and anything could happen to you, and you could just disappear anytime. You could lose everyone you love or anything you have. Of course, someone who believes that has to be suffering. But it's a subtle suffering, it's a deep suffering, and this is a suffering that is very important to notice and to acknowledge. You could say, yeah, sometimes maybe out of your meditation or your progress, you may start noticing I don't know, it could be like a deep sadness that comes to you, not really caused by anything around you. Take that as a sign of like a certain kind of accomplishment. You are digging in the right direction. So you may feel confused. This is the part where in Buddhism they call it the Shanga, like having people around you can talk to. Or most importantly, like I still have having teachers, someone who can really actually mentor you and not just be someone you talk to, but someone who actually points you in the right direction. So just find someone, anyone. It took me a long time to find, but at some point you get an idea what a real teacher is. It's not necessarily someone who's famous or who have many books or something like that. It's just someone who really points you towards the right direction. And this could definitely shortcut your path a lot, but nevertheless, most people, sooner or later, you're alone on your own. So when you find this deep suffering, this existential suffering, or doing whatever kind of practice you're doing, more than ever, don't stop. Don't get frustrated. Don't get disappointed. That kind of suffering is a sign that you're getting closer and closer. So don't stop. Go deeper. Go deeper. Just to the point to discover that what the Buddha said, what Jesus said, you're free from suffering already. That existential suffering is just the last layer. So be cheerful. You're close. If your suffering has no external cause, you're on the right path. Just don't be afraid of it. Penetrate that suffering with your presence, with your relaxation, with your giving yourself to God, or just by resting in pure awareness. Let it happen. It's not real. It's just a very profound, abstract kind of thought, of belief that you are real in a dream. But you're not. And that realization, becoming lucid in this life, it is what is understood as enlightenment. So you're lucid, you're here. And if you still suffer, that's okay. All the spiritual paths start from there, and it counts on that right until the last moment. Beyond that moment, there's no more suffering, and you know it, and it's clear. And you know it will never happen. It cannot possibly happen. And if you ever, because there's a lot of spiritual teachers who kind of fall back from there, you just forgot. You got engaged in thought or patterns. You thought you got them, but you didn't. And that's okay. That's okay too. Nobody's here to judge you. Don't do it. Just take your suffering as the most important teacher you will ever have.